Right, let's go back to one of our top stories and get your reaction to the Phala Phala farm report. Former Cabinet Minister Dr. Musibudi Mangena says while the president has not been charged criminally, the damning report against him is not good for the country's well-being.
You know, he had styled himself as somebody who is fighting for a good cause, was fighting against corruption, and as an ethical leader, as a moral leader. But as we speak, morally, ethically, and politically, he's in a difficult space. And well, of course, he might say that legally these things are not proven in a court of law, and that he can still go there and prove his innocence. But the country can't afford such a distracted head of state in such difficult circumstances in which it finds itself. So I think to have a morally and ethically compromised president is not a good thing for anybody.
We're now joined by Zwelinzima Vavi, the General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, for more on this development. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you for availing yourself. You are of the belief that the president should remove himself with immediate effect?
There is no other option. And this Section 89, the independent panel's report is just damning. And it have put the president 6 feet down into a coffin and ready to be buried by his own enemies within his own party. And he has to go. And for the sake of himself, his family, for the sake of the country and its well-being, he has to resign. And he shouldn't wait for the NEC meeting tonight, and where thieves will be presiding on what to do with another thief. And he should leave right now. And further, SAFTU calls on the police to dip in and conclude the investigation on all of the areas. And if President is arrested as a result of allegations that he violated PRECA, the Reserve Bank Act, in terms of money laundering and or keeping hard currency of a foreign country in his possession for more than the law prescribed, then he has to, like everybody else, be put into a trial where he must prove his guilt or not. And if he's found guilty in that process, he must be immediately put into prison for a long sentence to get perhaps the lesson that we've been seeking, that one day we will get, that a head of a state that has betrayed his people will then be sent to prison to serve as a public education to the ministers, who we believe most of them, if they were to be investigated on corruption, will be found wanting. And may follow him in prison. That we believe that we have been vindicated, frankly. We have said over and over again, right from the beginning. And from the beginning, we raised an issue of a president winning an election, and based on raising R1 billion, which he refuses to disclose who it came from, so that we can see whether that money comes from any business person who may today be preferred as a person who wins most of the tenders of the government. From the beginning, the president compromised himself. He is not in a position, as we speak, to go out to the ground and tell anybody that we shouldn't use money in the political disagreements, in the contestations within political parties. Beyond that, he came to the presidency already pulling massive and loads of other allegations of corruption against him. You know that there has been prima facie evidence that whilst he was in Shanduka, in Lonmin and MTN, he was involved in what we call illicit cash outflows out of the South Africa, something that is costing this economy more than 400 billion rands annually, according to the government and according to many other research institutions that have made a research on this issue. We now know why the government have no appetite and have done so little to investigate the allegations of illicit cash outflow from this economy, or to address the issues of massive fraud and corruption that have made our private sector to be rated the second most corrupt in the world by the PwC consistently and conservatively. In our view, we are also vindicated. The point that we made right at the beginning as SAFTU in our inaugural Congress, that there is no better devil in the ANC warring factions. They are all the same. One of the senior leaders of the ANC is on record as saying that all of us here have our own smolanyana skeletons, and that if these skeletons were to be released or taken out of the cupboards, the hell will break loose, to quote her directly.
Mr. Vavi, please do allow me to join you for the purpose of time. I do beg your pardon. One of the observations that the panel made is that the President indicated that about 8 institutions that are investigating the Phala Phala issue have not furnished the panel with the reports on the outcomes of their investigations, the likes of the SARS, etc. Is this something that should be concerning?
That was not the terms of reference. The terms of reference given by that Section 89 committee were very clear. They were narrow, of course. There was no time, we admit, but the preliminary investigations are just indicative of a deep crisis. The terms of reference was anybody with evidence must come forward to present it to the committee. The President himself was given an opportunity to present his case to the committee, and quite clearly, based on his own submission, the 3 judges are not convinced. They are not convinced because there's, firstly, as they say, there's no evidence that he received any money from some Sudanese business person. None whatsoever. And secondly, there is no tax return statement of any kind that from the sales of these buffaloes he would have paid tax, and above all, there is evidence that he kept that money for more than 30 days, way beyond what is required by the law, and that those buffaloes allegedly sold are still in his possession in the farm. And there is also evidence that he conducted business whilst being a head of the state, something that is specifically not allowed in terms of the Constitution of the Republic. So for that, there can be no excuse that we must wait for this and that other committee or that institution of the state. They must continue to do their work, and they have their own terms of reference in terms of investigating. But in terms of this report, a damning report by this committee of 3 judges, he has to go.
Zwelinzima Vavi, General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions.